Let's make him feel welcome, if you would, please.
Kobe, thanks for the opportunity to be here today, and I think Shelby's in the back and she's going to help us with a little presentation. But when Kobe and I talked about this a little bit, we talked about some different things that we could discuss. And despite what you're going to see and you're going to hear from me, you have to remember that Lincoln is a very, very safe community. It's a great place to live, work, and raise a family, and I feel humbled to be part of this community that makes that a reality. Thanks, Roy. Appreciate that. Okay.
There you go.
So this is going to be an interactive presentation. Please ask any questions that come to mind as they come up. The first thing I want to start it off is try to get some interaction. Last year, the Lincoln Police Department responded to 121,000 calls for service. 121,000, that's quite a few times that our officers are going into homes, conducting traffic stops, going to the local area hospitals. Of that, what percentage would you think is directly related to criminal activity, to crime, as we all think about it? 20, less than 5, 10%? Faith says 98? Okay. Ranging the gamut. But the actuality is only 30% of that 121,000 calls for service directly relates to crime. And does anybody want to take a guess at some of the other things that the Lincoln Police Department does that maybe we don't think about in a traditional sense? Yes, ma'am. Mental health investigations. In fact, since 2013, our mental health investigations are up over 38%. It's one of the escalating things that we see and hear about each day. Anything else? Children. Lots of different things as it relates to children, some of which are directly related to criminal activity, child abuse, neglect, some of which are not. We had over 1,700 runaways that the Lincoln Police Department investigated last year. And that's a tragedy, really. When many of you, I'm certain, have children, and when you think about them being in a situation where it's outside of their control, it's a sad deal. 10,000 accident investigations, many, many different things that the Lincoln Police Department is responsible for outside of criminal activity. But one of the things we wanted to touch on today was gang trends in Lincoln. And as you can see from this slide, we have more than 1,230 documented criminal gang members in Lincoln and Lancaster County. And this number is something that we put a lot of scrutiny to. It isn't just a label that we want to place on someone that follows them. These people are intimately involved in criminal activity. There's 35 active gangs. It ranges the age from 10 to 30. It crosses all demographic barriers: race, ethnicity, gender. And we know firsthand in Lincoln, Nebraska, that from homicides to vandalism, graffiti, they are making an impact on the community where we all live. And as we go forward, I thought one of the best examples, the best ways to show to you that gang violence does happen in Lincoln. And I see Pat Condon in the crowd, and I want to talk to you a little bit about this video that I'm going to show. This is a surveillance video from a local area business. And there's been 5 people that have been arrested in this particular incident that stems back to February of this year. One of which has pled guilty and is in prison. 4 of which, the prosecutions are still pending. And so we have an active partnership with the county attorney's office. It's one of our best partners with all of you in keeping our community safe. And we talked about this because it isn't something typically that we would show prior to court disposition. Okay, and if I can get some help, and we'll play it a couple times. It's very short, but watch closely. Off to your east, it's looking to the east, you're going to see the lights of Lincoln High. This is just before 8 p.m. in the area of 21st and G. In the upper right-hand corner, you see headlights, and it's hard to see, but when you're watching it on a smaller screen, that car is stopped there and you can see the occupants get out and go into the trunk of the vehicle. If it's going to play for us. I promise we prepared. Okay. With that, it's a very short video, but I'm gonna narrate to you what happens, and if it starts playing in the background, let me know. That car that stopped at the intersection of 21st and G pulls into the parking lot. You see a white Jeep that's parked, and some of the occupants are inside. Well, that Jeep begins to pull away, begins to back out, and the white Mercury Marquis pulls in adjacent to this parking lot. And then what you see is you can see that there's a verbal exchange between these two vehicles. And two occupants of the white Mercury Marquis get out, and then you can see that they're basically taking some cover. They're ducking down, using it as cover, and then they pull out a handgun and they shoot 6 times. They shoot 6 times as that white Jeep proceeds away. We later learn that these are rival gang members, that there's been at least 4, if not 5 incidents that have preceded this particular interaction. Only 2 of those rounds from that handgun struck that white Jeep. Some of them went into a local area business. Thankfully, there was nobody on the street and was hurt. But what this goes into is that gang violence is prevalent here, and there is a blatant disregard for any human life. How many of you have been out in the last couple weeks getting gas at 8 o'clock at night? I know I have, right? And again, on this night, there was probably activities that are occurring at Lincoln High School. So what's happening here? And it's something that all of us need to relay that it's not part of the expectations of Lincoln, Nebraska. These kind of things should not happen in our community. That's okay. If we get it later, we'll just go back to the slideshow. Shall we? Yeah. We'll just go back to the next slide. All right. Some more gang trends in Lincoln. We got 4 different dates on here. Our personnel, whether it's our gang unit or members of our organization, do an outstanding job of communicating with our peers in Omaha, Nebraska. More and more what we are seeing is a strong influence from gang members coming to Lincoln, Nebraska. We ask ourselves why. I asked Chief Chad Schmatter, why are they migrating to Lincoln? And one, there's a lot of events that are occurring here. We look at some New Year's Eve parties, January 1st, 2017, 16th to 17th, a group of individuals flow out onto the streets, stop traffic immediately surrounding Bar Break. April 11th, Chris Brown at the Pinnacle Bank Arena. There's a large after party. And during that after party, fights break out. One of our officers is struck in the head with a chair. June 10th, the Bourbon Theater. I don't know how many of you remember seeing the news coverage on this, but T Grizzly, it's a rap concert there, and we knew that this was happening. We had been in communication with Omaha. They had let us know. We'd been in communication with the management at the Bourbon Theater. But following what happened inside there, hundreds of people flew out or went onto O Street, stopped traffic in all directions, actively fighting. As our officers, as the UNL officers, as Nebraska State Troopers are trying to intercede and stop this, there's disregard. They are not going to listen to the voice of authority. And then we're fast forward again. Terrence Crawford, August 20th, 2017, a great event for the city of Lincoln. I can tell you this, we knew for months in advance that this was going to be a problem because it's been a problem in Omaha. It's a problem in Las Vegas when large-scale fights boxing matches occur because of the draw. Pinnacle Bank, really, we have an excellent relationship with them. There's no issues that surround it. We had met with individual bar owners for weeks in advance saying, this is the experiences that were happening in Omaha. There are going to be after parties. There are going to be rival gang members because Terrence Crawford has that association. And we're telling them, don't do it. Please don't do it. Try to let them go back to Omaha. Well, most people took us up on that. And I'm not here to stifle private business. I know that there's tremendous competition for making a go of it. But sometimes you have to worry about the safety and security of your facility, of your staff, and also the people that live and work here. So on that particular night, about 1 o'clock, Terrence Crawford, following winning, goes to a local area bar. We have 15, 20 officers that we're keeping on overtime that all of you are paying to be there to try to prevent things from happening. Well, it doesn't prevent it, and fights break out on the inside of this establishment and on the outside, and we have to request every single available officer in Lincoln and Lancaster County to come and try to deal with this situation. All at one location. So all of you that live on the outskirts and anywhere else or own businesses, you're not being afforded the police protection because every resource that we have is dealing with this. In that 1 hour period between 1 o'clock and 2 o'clock in the morning, 344 calls come into our 911 center. Then you're going to couple that, if you remember on August 20th, there's a large storm, kind of unpredicted, that comes through our community. And August 20th is one of the busiest days that we've ever had at the Lincoln Police Department. 623 calls for service, over 3,000 incoming calls to our communications center, all of which were requiring some kind of action. So, gang members are coming to our community. They have anonymity because in Omaha, the Omaha Police Department knows who they are. They know who their affiliates are. They know where they are. They hang out. Just like us, they target problem people and problem places. It's a strategy that we use. We don't hide from it. It's just something that we do to try to efficiently police in our community. Now, following this, our gang unit has done something that I believe is outstanding. Early last week, we extended an invitation to every single liquor license holder in the city of Lincoln and said, come down to the Pinnacle Bank Arena. We had a presentation similar to this on gang trends, just trying to explain the whys of why we are concerned, of what our expectations are, and trying to hear some of their voices and concerns that they may have. And it was very well received, and hopefully, it is our hope and my belief that that has open lines of communication, and hopefully in the future, we'll be able to prevent some of these things from happening. Switch gears a little bit. Violent crime in Lincoln. Here's a trending since 1970, and this is not adjusted for population growth. These are raw numbers of violent crime. Violent crime is, anybody want to take? There's 4 different types of violent crime. Anybody? Homicide, murder. Aggravated assault, so felony assault, significant bodily injury, that's 2. Rape, I heard somebody say rape, sexual assault, that's 3. Robbery's the other one. As you can see, there seems to be a trending downwards, right? Especially if you start looking at 2010 to 2011. But these numbers deserve a deeper dive. In 2010 and 2011, prior to me being at the Lincoln Police Department, there was an internal audit that was done that we recognized that our classification of an aggravated assault, a serious assault, was incorrect. Therefore, we had to adjust that. And you can see there's a significant decline in 2010 to 2011. If we would go back in time and apply that, and that's quite an effort, you would see that since probably 1997 or before, so for more than 2 decades, raw numbers of violent crime has been static in the city of Lincoln. That's pretty good, because we're going to talk a little bit about the population growth. Another thing that we need to consider when we look at these numbers, and we're judged by these numbers, we look at this stuff all the time. We have to analyze trends. In 2016, there was a redefinition of sexual assault, a redefinition of rape, where the FBI says you need to expand your definition of rape, which we did. And that has significantly increased our numbers. Not because there's more rapes that are happening, but because what previously was not classified as a sexual assault now is. This is supposed to be, it's called uniform crime reporting by the FBI. Uniform across the country. I can tell you it's not uniform. Not even close. And we'll get into some of the whys of that. Here's a little bit of graph, and for time purposes, and I know Kobe's going to cut me off about 10 minutes, so if you have questions, you can certainly ask them. Here is a trending analysis of felony arrests, static. But these are for violent crimes, violent crime felony arrests, and it holds true. We're arresting about the same number because there's about the same number of offenses happening. But we do have significant increases in felony arrests in our community. Does anybody want to guess what's driving those? Drugs. Felony narcotic arrests continue to spiral. And I see Todd Wilchin sitting in here. And as part of the Justice Reinvestment Council, we talk about these things because all of those people arrested for felonies are going into the adult detention facility on West O. This is one of my favorite slides, Lincoln versus Omaha. Why? Because I think it paints us in a pretty favorable light. These are numbers from 2016. The top one is shootings, and this means shootings where injury happens. 135 in Omaha, 22 in Lincoln. And then I want to talk to you about year-to-date numbers for shootings in Lincoln. This year, so far, there are three shootings that have involved injury in 2017, and we're into September. Aggravated assaults in Omaha, 1,647 versus 587. Rape, 244 versus 223. Robbery, 610 versus 191. And murder, last year, 11 homicides in the city of Lincoln, the most ever. There were 29 in Omaha. But what this tells me is a couple different things. One, Lincoln's safe. Two, is that rape. All the others are about 3 times as much, if not more. Why are the numbers of rape in Lincoln almost the same as the numbers of rape in Omaha? Campus. Of course, UNO and Creighton are pretty big facilities up in Omaha. Anybody else? I heard some comments. I'm sorry. Classification is right. Classification. In 2016, the Omaha Police Department did not follow the guidelines presented by the FBI, and they are guidelines, and they continued with their classification, and they chose to cut off in June, instead of in June of 2016, which we did, they cut it off they began in January of 2017. But it also goes to this. We have outstanding partners with victim advocates, with Bryan Health Systems and Catholic Health Initiatives, where people here report, and we're going to guess about 33% of sexual assaults, which is much higher than what the national standard is. And it's a good thing that people are reporting these crimes, because hopefully that leads to ending to arresting those who are responsible. A couple other things that I wanted to share, and it's in the news for those of you that follow the news. We've had 8 bank robberies this year. We had an attempt yesterday, and we had one that actually happened where pepper spray was deployed, so someone was injured. 3 of the 8 we have cleared. I'm here to tell you we have some pretty strong suspects in the remaining 5. And we think that many of those are related to the same group of individuals. 7 people, we had 7 in 2016. 7 bank robberies in 2016. 6 of those have been cleared where people have been arrested. Okay, here's another one of property. Part 1 crimes, property crime. Kobe and I talked about this. This is one of the things that we wanted to bring to you. As you can see, a continuing decline of the number of property crimes in Nebraska, or in Lincoln. Why? We work roughly 10,000 total Part 1 crimes every single year. And property crimes are the significant portion of that. As you can see in 2016, they were about 3,000, and that's a big chunk of them. Larceny from autos, burglaries are the main property crimes. Larceny from autos are the biggest driver of that. What can all of you do? Lock your cars. Please lock your cars. Don't leave your cars running. Do not leave your firearm in your unlocked car. Please, please, because you're all going to feel terrible. I know I would, and I've probably done it too during my 20 years in law enforcement or 22 years in law enforcement. I've probably left a gun, hopefully in a locked car. It's not worth it, because if somebody gets a hold of that gun and uses it in a crime, nobody's going to feel worse than any of us. So let's talk about we're going to transition here just a little bit. We're going to talk about some things. I shared with you that violent crime, static, not adjusted for population growth. Property crime continuing to decline. Calls for service, I can tell you, continue to decline over the years. Why? Many of those are policy changes. One of the biggest policy changes is privatization of downtown parking enforcement, so hopefully all of you are not getting a ticket, but if you are right now, it has nothing to do with the Lincoln Police Department. You can call us, but that's what we'll tell you. Population is growing. We have added over 35,000 people in the last decade to our city. It is a testament to all of you who run businesses here. Everybody wants to come here. That's the size of Kearney. We have added the size of Kearney to our community in the last decade. Let's talk about geographic expanse. We've added over 8.7 square miles to our city, and it continues to grow. I mean, how many of you have been south of 84th and Yankee Hill lately? I mean, seeing that growth out there. 8.7 square miles, the size of Fremont, the population of Kearney. Let's talk about Lincoln police officers per square mile. And as you can see, that number continues to decline. In 2006, we had 315 commissioned Lincoln police officers. Prior to the passing of the most current budget resolution, we had 329. So in a decade, we added 14 officers. Grew 35,000 people, added 8.7 square miles. I'm not even going to venture a guess of how many schools and teachers that we've added. But despite that, violent crime static, property crime declining. That's good. Calls for service. Again, you can see that there is a general decline downward. Now, this really is driven by policy changes. One of the biggest policy changes that we constantly consider that would make an impact on all of you, and we have not done this, is that if we stopped investigating accidents, that would drop our calls for service by 9,000 every single year. Actually, it'd probably be closer to 7,500 because we would still investigate injury accidents. But most of the time, most of the people in this room, that is your only interaction with the Lincoln Police Department. And hopefully, despite it being a very negative experience, nobody wants to be in a car crash. Hopefully, that interaction is a positive and it provides a service. And we understand that, and we really do not want to stop investigating accidents. Okay. So, one of the other conversations, what time do I got? I got a couple minutes here yet.
I'm gonna do some questions.
Yeah, but let's talk about how do we know how many law enforcement officers we need in the city of Lincoln? What is the matrix that we should use? And they're all over the board, and I'm just going to talk to you about a few of them. One of the simplest, and that's used uniformly around the country, because it's easy, is the number of officers per 1,000 of population. The Lincoln Police Department is at 1.17 officers per 1,000. My peer up in Omaha, today he's at 1.9. Very soon he'll be at 2.0. So I love to use this fact because you saw the difference, right? We showed you the difference between Omaha, which has 450,000, and Lincoln that has about 280,000 people. To have the same number of officers per 1,000, we would have to hire 192 commissioned officers today. 192. At the cost to you of $16 million every single year. And that's just personnel costs. That's not uniforms and bullets and police cars and all the other stuff. So that's one thing that we look at. There is 27, I believe, communities in Nebraska with a population over 5,000. There's one, Madison, that has a lower ratio of officers per 1,000 than what Lincoln does. And we see that same trend across the country. Is that the matrix we use? I don't know. Here's another matrix that we use. Every single year, we do a complex workload analysis of every single one of our officers, and we incorporate in sick time, vacation time, the number of calls for service, the number of part-run crimes they're doing, police reports, you name it. It's all part of this formula, and a fairly standardized formula across the country. The experts in policing philosophy say, once you reach the 60% number of committed time, so responding to calls for service, completing police reports, engaging with the public, once you reach that 60% number, there is a spiral downward in the service that you provide to the community. Well, I'm here to tell you that we've been at that 60% number right around there, just below, for a decade. And it really does not seem, at least from my perspective, to be adversely affecting the services we provide all of you. So really what it boils down to me is, how many cops do we need in the city of Lincoln? That's up to the expectations of all of you. Yes, sir.
How much of a deterrent is the people with ADT and other systems in our homes or businesses that are working?
Okay. ADT, if you didn't hear the gentleman, he's asking how much of a deterrent is an alarm system, basically. And we believe that it is a deterrent. Now, alarms is one of the things that we talked about in a policy change that happened with ordinance, probably in 2002, I'm guessing. I can't remember. Where there was a registration fee required, and then also there is a fine for repeat false alarms. And I was just looking at these numbers. I don't know this gentleman, so we didn't set this question up. And through September of this year, there was one business that has 10 false alarms. And I think it's more incumbent upon the Lincoln Police Department to reach out to the management of that particular business and say, hey, can we do something to fix this particular problem? because it is a national chain, and I'm confident if they are being fined, that it's just getting into the bill pile and probably being sent off to some other community when it's being paid. So those personal conversations happen in that one location. I think we, the Lincoln Police Department, just need to do a better job. Now, is it a deterrent? We firmly believe that it is a deterrent, but there also has to be a realistic expectation. We get alarms, thousands of alarms, residential and commercial, every single year. Now, a skilled police officer, a tenured police officer, is going to know that at 3 o'clock in the morning, a glass break at a local area business is probably something we better pay attention to. To where a bank alarm, not a bank alarm, let's not use that example. A residential alarm in the early morning hours when people are getting ready to leave for work is probably not one that we should be sending 2 police cars screaming across town at 100 miles an hour, because we're trying to balance safety versus response. But to answer your question, I do believe it's a deterrent. Yes, sir.
Is there a tipping point, either in population or number of gangs that arrive in a city where all of a sudden there's this big spike? So maybe we're just kind of...
Tipping point, great question. Population, criminal activity, again, I don't know him either, but it's a very important talking point. I do believe that there is a tipping point. Now, I don't know if it's a magical number of 300,000 people, the population of the city, or a number of Parkland crimes. What I'm here to tell you is this. When that tipping point does come, we have to be, it takes us about 2 years to recruit, vet, train, and deploy a new police officer. So if we start seeing more and more of an influence of gang activity, which we are seeing, of violent crime, of even property crime, we're about 2 years behind trying to get caught up. And I can tell you this, if Kobe Max says, Jeff, we're going to make it happen, we're going to get you an extra $16 million every single year, he's not going to say that, I know that. I tell you, there's no way we can hire 192 people that are going to pass that particular vetting process. I'm sure all of you struggle to find and retain quality employees, right? And your employees aren't taking polygraphs. They're not taking an 8-hour psychological exam where we're trying to dive into the deepest areas of their lives to make sure that they do not exhibit explicit bias or have tendencies towards that, or are pathological in lying, or an alcoholic, or a drug abuser, those kinds of things. And so tipping point is a great conversation. I don't want to be in the position of where we just cannot meet the expectations that all of you deserve. Yes, ma'am.
My question relates to mental health. I mean, as we're seeing, there's more and more cases of violence, criminal acts, of people that are mentally ill, and sometimes they can't really help it. So what is the Lincoln Police Department doing to be more proactive rather than reactive regarding that situation of mental health, and seeing, who's really just mean because they're mean and who's just really mentally ill?
Great question. Laura? Is it Laura?
Laura Bell.
Laura Bell. If you didn't hear over there, Laura is asking, what is the Lincoln Police Department doing in a proactive sense to try to address the ever-increasing mental health crisis that we're experiencing here? And it is, if I have a chart here and I have it for other presentations, we see a dramatic incline in the number of mental health cases that we're working. What do? From day one in the academy, we begin training. And every single year, we're training on mental illness and bringing in experts. Because Lincoln Police Department is not experts. We are very, very good at interceding in the moment of stopping someone from hurting themselves or hurting someone else. But then we have to rely on our community partners. And I'm here to tell you that traveling around the country, I was just in Charlottesville, Virginia, 2-3 weeks ago, talking to 50 chiefs of similar sized organizations, and they were talking about the mental health crisis. They do not have the resources that we have. They do not have Bryan Health Systems. They don't have the bridge, the Lancaster County Crisis Center, and so many people that are willing to make the sacrifices that are needed. But I can also tell you this, 3 days is oftentimes the most that we can intercede in the most violent encounters, right? There is not beds. There are not long-term placement beds. And when you talk to experts in the field and I show them the trend line of increasing calls for service, they're pointing towards the defunding, the change in philosophy of not institutionalizing the mentally ill, which I agree with. I agree with. But unfortunately, 3 days sometimes is not enough time to get someone through a very dramatic crisis. So training, constantly talking to our officers, de-escalation. I know in the national media we're seeing all the time snippets of video of law enforcement officers that are trying. I think in Georgia, they're telling the person, drop the knife, drop the knife, drop the knife. Doesn't drop the knife. Comes at the officers with the knife. They don't have tasers. They don't have an alternate ability, and unfortunately that person loses their life. It's tragic. But I think it is better in Nebraska than it is in a lot of communities around the country. Other questions?
Chief, are you doing anything specifically to increase the clearance rate on business burglaries, and what could a business owner do that would help the police department?
Great question. So business burglaries, commercial burglaries is how we classify it. And in preparation for today's event, I pulled up the number of commercial burglaries that we have had this year to date. 159, if my memory serves me correctly. To date, last year, I think it was 148. Now, that also includes storage units, which is